Katona Rose, and this is another Just the Facts Ma'am mental health edition. So I had kind of earmarked mental health as something I wanted to talk about for quite a while. I had noticed that a lot of streamers and gamers that I watch on YouTube had been talking about mental health a lot. They've been talking about going to therapy and all kinds of stuff, and I am going to kind of circle back on that because I do think it's something that's really worth chatting about as well, just the normalization of it. But very recently, something happened to my family that made mental health really come to the forefront. And I think that as much as it might be awkward to talk about, it's something that I think a lot of you out there may have experienced as well. And you may have some, personal life history with what I'm talking about. So rather than be sort of embarrassed or worried about talking about it, I thought, you know what, just go out there and say what you're going to say. And, hopefully someone out there is nodding along and going, yeah, I've been through that too. When my family moved from Toronto, I had just had my second daughter, and we knew we had wanted to get out of Toronto. We wanted to get out of the city. We were kind of right in the middle of it all, and it was great when we were, two young kids and not worried about our own young kids. But as soon as you bring babies and young kids into the equation, all of a sudden your priorities kind of change a little bit. So we were looking at moving outside of Toronto. My family lives in the US, so they're not as much of a consideration, but my husband's family lives further north in Ontario. So we kind of looked at moving closer to them. I had horses at the time, so part of the equation was trying to find a place with land where I could keep my horses. It just basically, we ran out of time. Long story short, our oldest was going into kindergarten. We wanted to get her into a school so she could, at least have the year in one place. And so we ended up renting. We found a super crazy deal and have been there ever since. We pay way less than a mortgage, and we have paid way less than we probably ought to have for at least a couple years. Last week, our landlord came to us and said that she wanted to sell the house. So understandably, we were a bit panicked because most of the rentals in our area are 2 to 3 times what we're paying right now, which is obviously a drastic increase and a massive lifestyle change. But more than that, it basically puts us into mortgage territory. So, my husband and I sort of sat down and had a bit of a cry about it. And then we said, we probably should just get a mortgage and get a house. We are looking at purchasing the house we're currently in. Obviously, in an ideal world, we would get a good deal on this and be able to stay right where we are. That may not happen. So in the future, in the next few months, whatever happens with that is obviously going to affect how often I'm on and how often I'm able to record and I'm able to edit. There may be some downtime in there that is just unavoidable. Hopefully not. But again, we'll see how things go. The reason why I'm telling this story is because when we were told that she wanted to sell the house, it was a Friday. And we both came home from work, and it was just like, stress, anxiety, panic, all kinds of things just floating through my mind, his mind. I've said for most of my life that it's the not being able to make decisions that's the worst part of anything. When you can't say, okay, we're going to do this. This is the game plan. How you're moving forward. That's the tough part. That's the part where you don't know. And you kind of have to sort of marinate in that not knowing and the sort of anxiety and snowball effect that can happen from wondering what you're going to do and how are we going to manage this with the girls, and can we keep them in the same school? Are we going to have to drive them from far away to be able to keep them it's this kind of rapid wormhole that sucks you down, and I think it's very easy to fall into that. And I think as human beings, you have to give yourself a little bit of space to do that, because it's natural and it's normal, and there's nothing wrong with, having some anxiety at some bad news, like dealing with the bad news, feeling it, grieving for it, however it looks. Originally, I went to school for psychiatry. That was what I wanted to do. When I was 15 years old, I called every psychiatrist in my city and basically said, hey, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Can I come work for you? And I ended up getting into a really nice situation at an office that was rented out by a lot of different types of psychologists and psychiatrists. And for a young person, it was such an awesome opportunity because it really led me to all these different sort of schools of thought. It also really helped me deal with personal stuff, my own sort of hangups and my own issues. I think that having that in my life at such a young age helped to buffer a little bit of the bad that can come from being a young female in a very religious area. I think that had I not had that experience, had I not been around all of those awesome people, professionals, and had them care for me and kind of look out for me the way that they did, I probably would have entered adulthood way, way more off kilter than I actually did. I finished out high school. I got into the honors program at my university, and I was doing a major in psychiatry and a minor in mass comm. My joke was, I was going to take over the world. The thing that I liked so much about psychiatry and psychology was the people. I've mentioned before, I love people. I love talking to them about their stories. It was a very natural thing for me to fall into. Specifically, I was interested in forensic psychology, and for most of my early university life, that was my focus. And I started to realize sort of early on that I had hangups that were never going to mesh with that lifestyle. I don't want to get too into the dregs about it, but there's certain types of aberrant behavior that I would run into in a criminal capacity that I just couldn't deal with, that I just couldn't wrap my head around, even though the logic part of my brain could talk me through it and could talk me around it and what have you. Standing in front of certain people and hearing them talk about certain things just made it impossible for me to continue on that path. I had sort of gotten sidetracked into research psychiatry and psychology, and it just wasn't interesting to me in the way that forensic psychiatry was. So I sort of fell off and didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Being the age that I am now, I kind of think it's crazy that we're asking someone who's 16, 17, 18 years old to pick what they want to do for the rest of their lives. Most of the people I know are kind of reevaluating what they're doing with their lives right now. And that's a good, 30 years post 18. So it's interesting, right? I think that some people absolutely have it in their heart. They know what they want to do. They go through everything. It works out exactly how they want it to. And that's awesome. And I definitely don't want to take anything away from them. But I do think it's important to recognize that just because you either don't know what you want to do with the rest of your life, or you get into school and realize that what you thought you were getting into is not what ended up happening, it's not a bad thing. It's not the end of the world. It feels like it in the moment, but there's so much life left to live, and there's so much time for you to work that it really is important that you like what you do and that what you do makes you happy. I know work-life balance is something that people throw around, being part of the family in an office, people throw that around. And I think that sometimes it is just lip service, but sometimes it really does have a basis in something wholesome and something real and something true. I think that if you can find yourself in a work environment that makes you feel appreciated and valued and makes you feel like, yeah, you're going to go the extra mile for them, but they're also going to let you kind of take some time away and do things on your own, and they're not going to be counting the hours and kind of, were you sitting at your desk at the right time? I think that becomes more important than what your actual job is and what your actual title is. Of course, if you hate what you're doing, that's never going to change. And I think, especially in North America, we really have this habit of sort of, we work so that we can do other things that we want to do, rather than trying to figure out how we can make those things we want to do part of our work. But all of this is really kind of a roundabout way of just talking about how we sort of self-sabotage ourselves and our mental health. I think that there are a lot of people and a lot of businesses that if you have a physical ailment or you have a physical disease or disorder, it's something that tends to be very accepted and people are understanding. And if you need time off, that's fine. I think mental health is something that's still sort of on the cusp, because it depends on where you work and it depends on the industry you're in and it depends on who you work for. And it also depends on your gender, race, and privilege. Having it be enough of a metropolis that everybody kind of knows that mental health is health. It's not a whole separate weird thing. It is part of your physical body. It is part of what makes us all tick. Then you have people who live on the outskirts who are basically told to toughen up. I think one of the most harmful statements that exists out there is, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't think that anyone who's experienced real trauma would ever agree with that statement. The fact that they survived shows their strength. The trauma didn't make them stronger, and it never will, because you're always going to kind of have that in the back of your mind in certain situations. At the core of everything, I think we have to be kind to one another. We especially have to be kind to ourselves. Getting outside in nature has been shown by so many different studies in so many different countries in so many different capacities to improve both physical and mental well-being. Where I work is about 500 acres of forest. It is a place that I go to and I feel my whole system kind of and that is hugely helpful to me. And I recognize that that is something that most people do not get. But most of us can go outside and go for a walk and be around trees and birds and grass. And it's important to make that part of your day. Listen, I'm as guilty as the next person for having lazy days in and, Netflix binging and playing games for hours. But there has to be a balance, and there has to be some recognition of what your body actually needs and what it wants in order to thrive, not just survive, if that makes sense. Originally, when I wanted to talk about mental health, I obviously was going to bring up, my past and my history and my education background. I still have my good old DSM. It's something that I look at every once in a while, and anytime they do an update, I like to kind of see what's changed. But that's not really why I wanted to have the conversation. Yes, psychiatry and psychology is always going to be interesting to me. Like most sciences, I think that it's just fascinating that we're constantly learning and we're constantly adjusting and we're constantly shifting what we know and what we understand. And that's great. And that's what science is. But the thing that I've noticed recently, and again, this may just be me being a parent, but so many of the YouTubers and streamers that I watch and that I also watch when my kids are around are very open about doing things for their mental health, whether that be seeing a professional or taking a break so that they can, take some time for themselves and not have the stress of posting or streaming or whatever. Also, just improving certain things about themselves, people that maybe are a bit angry or people that are anxious or whatever. It kind of gives them a toolkit to work with and use and develop. And the fact that it can be talked about so casually is thrilling to me. It really is something that just brings a smile to my face and just fills me with so much joy. Recently, I was watching a YouTuber. She was streaming on YouTube for the first time. And she said something along the lines of like, oh, I can't do that. I have enough of a problem with, my anxiety and my mental health. And I just have to, look after myself that way. And it was just a really casual answer to a comment and chat. And I remember sitting there and just wanting to be like, thank you. Thank you for just casually talking about mental health and not making it a big deal and not making it something that has to be sort of excluded and taken to the side and talked about on its own. Sort of like what I'm doing right now, I guess. But in the way of it's just normal. And it's just part of health. I really hope that as a society we grow and we learn and we sort of just normalize more and more the idea of overall health, the idea of mind, body, soul, the idea of taking care of ourselves and each other, and especially being kind. I was not kind to myself growing up. I was not kind to the kid that I was. I was not kind to the teenager that I was. I was not kind to the young adult that I was. And it really took some age and some time and being around certain people before I finally found myself leveling out and gaining more confidence in just the fact that I was a worthy human, as silly as that might sound. And I think there's a lot of people out there who sort of feel the same way. And all I can say to you is you do have worth and you do have value, and you have no idea the people in your life that would be devastated to lose you. I think most people, when they hit, certain life milestones, sort of wish they could go back and talk to their younger self and give advice. And I would love to have some conversations with that girl, because I feel like I could save her a whole lot of heartache and a whole lot of strife and, sadness and depression. And that's okay. You get through it, hopefully. But you have to address it and you have to recognize that it's an issue to begin with. Some of the stuff I'm going to speak to is coming from the position of someone who is lucky enough to be under universal health care. So for me, it's easy to say, go get help, go find someone to talk to, because it's not something that I have to necessarily even consider financially. Having said that, if you are youth and you are someone who needs to talk to someone, there are so many options for you. Crisis lines and help opportunities that will cost you nothing, that will not go back to your parents. If you are someone who is older and who can't afford psychiatry or psychology or even just therapy, there are going to be different opportunities in your community, whether it's faith-based or gender-based or ethnicity-based. There's going to be something in your community that's going to be able to at least let you join in a group of people who are dealing with some of the same things that you are dealing with. You know, if you are someone who's suffering with substance abuse, there are so many different options. It doesn't have to be, you know, the 12-step program. There's other things available. Look at your local colleges, look at local universities, check out your community centers. Do a lot of Googling. You're going to find something. You're going to find something that works for you, whether it's online, in person, over the phone, over text, whatever. There's so many different options that exist now. And there's really no excuse to let yourself flounder. If you had weird, erratic heartbeats that were ongoing, that stopped you and made you sort of have to stand and catch your breath, and made it hard for you to play or walk or run or go upstairs, you would figure out a way to get that checked out pretty quickly. And I think that with mental health, with anxiety, with depression, with, you know, attention deficit disorders, with spectrum disorders, there are so many things that people are like, oh, well, it's not that important. I don't need to deal with it right now. Yeah, you do. Treat it like it's a physical health ailment. Treat it like it's something that you need to get looked at right away, because it may be. I don't think anyone out there is sort of like, yeah, I'm depressed and I'm going to hurt myself and, you know, just super calm and casual about it. That's generally not how it works. But it can be a hop, skip, and a jump from feeling bad to that. And I think a lot of us are really good at sort of putting on a smile and putting on a happy face and, you know, oh, I'm fine, don't worry about me. I think that you need to let people know that you are kind of struggling and that things do kind of suck. I think it's important to remember that when we're looking at social media, when we're looking online, when we're looking on television, whatever, you're always seeing sort of the curated version. You're always seeing kind of the happy face. Looking at that and measuring your life by that will never gain you happiness. It will never gain you comfort within your own skin. It needs to be seen as entertainment. It needs to be seen as, oh, wow, that's a high point. That's awesome. It needs to be recognized as something that is very carefully put together and put out. So I mentioned at the beginning of all this that I had planned on talking about some of this stuff for a while. But the reason why I wanted to talk about it now is, again, because over the last week or so, I've been hit with a lot. And it's been hard for me to focus. It's been hard for me to really motivate myself to do things. I have a job. I have a family. I have a life outside of this. And it's something that can be put by the wayside if I need to sort of take a step back. I don't love that, because I do enjoy coming on and playing games, and I do enjoy talking about different subjects with you guys. Some of you have started posting comments and having little discussions with me, either publicly or privately, and it's awesome, and I love it, and I would encourage anyone who has any interest whatsoever to do the same thing. But I just want you to know that I'm going through some stuff right now. And if I do sort of, stretch out time between posts, if I do seem to kind of disappear for, 3-4 days, I'm okay. I'm just dealing with other things. I'm going to try to keep everybody in the loop as much as possible. I was really hoping to have some live streaming dates when I came on next. I don't. Again, we'll sort of have to see what the next week brings as far as what we can negotiate for the house. And, hopefully everything moves forward, everything's fine, and I can next time announce some dates and some times that we can actually get on and do some live chats and have some fun that way. In the meantime, I really appreciate you sticking around. I really appreciate you guys that have sort of followed me and subscribed and taken the time to watch, whether you're into the gaming videos, whether you're into these videos, whether you just kind of throw me on in the background because my voice is monotonous enough that it doesn't bother you. Whatever the reason is, I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to the future and what is coming out soon between Starfield, which I want to do a whole video about soon, Cyberpunk, of course, and then some other things that are sort of hanging out in the wings. I'm really looking forward to the next few months. I'm really hopeful that the next few months don't completely get derailed for me and that I can kind of stay online and keep putting out content. But we'll see. I'll try to be as open and honest about what's happening as I can, because again, I think that there's probably enough of you out there who have gone through or are going through similar things, if not the exact same thing. So yeah, here's one more person who's kind of struggling to figure it out and try to make it work. As always, I really appreciate you watching the videos and listening to me ramble. If you're into it, please consider liking and subscribing. It would really help me out. And I really hope to see you in the next one. Thanks so much.